Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Weiner, Program Manager of Education and Practice at the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. Thank you for joining us for today's ASPPH Presents webinar, Characterizing Undergraduate Public Health Education within the Academic Public Health Continuum. Today's webinar will be 1 hour in length. We will begin with an introduction by our moderator, followed by a presentation by our two presenters, and ending with a question and answer period. This webinar is part of the 2017 ASPPH Presents monthly series, which has been designed as a service to CEPH accredited ASPPH member schools and programs of public health. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the ASPPH website in the archived webinar section soon. The link will be shared at the end of today's webinar and will also be emailed to you once the archived version is posted. Additionally, this webinar has been approved for 1 hour of CPH continuing education credit. A few housekeeping items of note. While you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the question box. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. We are pleased to have with us today our moderator, Dr. Richard Riegelman, who is a professor of epidemiology, biostatistics, and medicine, and the founding dean of the George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. Dr. Riegelman has been a leader in the development of undergraduate public health education, including the Educated Citizen and Public Health movement developed by the Association of American Colleges and Universities and the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. He has been active in the development of ASPPH undergraduate recommendations and the annual ASPPH Public Health and Global Health Undergraduate Summit. Dr. Riegelman also co-chaired the Community College and Public Health Project, an initiative of ASPPH and the League for Innovation in the Community College. He is continuing to work with these organizations to develop undergraduate public health education and integrate community colleges into the continuum of public health education. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Riegelman.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we move the slide ahead? Okay. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of the first on the series of ASPPH webinars that focus on the undergraduate efforts. And these were designed to be part of the 2017 ASPPH Public Health and Global Health Education Summit, which unfortunately was canceled because of weather. Today we are going to be looking at characterizing the undergraduate public health within the academic public health continuum. And I will give you a little introduction of the background on the undergraduate movement and where things have come from, and then I'll introduce our two speakers, Emily Burke and Beth Resnick. My involvement with undergraduate public health began in the summer, July, in fact, of 2001, when a lunch that I can remember very well with Harrison Spencer, the late Harrison Spencer, who was then only 1 year into his term of service to what was then the Association of Schools of Public Health. And I remember well him saying, undergraduate public health is a wave of the future. And in fact, it was the wave of the future, and I'd like to show you a little bit about how that evolved. One of the key pieces that happened in the next couple of years after our 2001 meeting was the Institute of Medicine report of 2003, Who Will Keep the Public Healthy, Educating Public Health Professionals for the 21st Century. And a key recommendation of that report was, quote, all undergraduates should have access to education in public health. I like to say in those days, people thought the all was a typo because it was such it was so unusual to have undergraduate public health be present in most colleges and universities. During the next few years, there was a large degree of growth in schools of public health and programs in public health, and a variety of minors and majors were beginning to emerge. In the 2006, 2007, 2008 period, an important event occurred, and that was the movement from this being focused exclusively on schools and programs to a much wider audience that included liberal arts education and a variety of different programs that were standalone, that did not have graduate public health as part of their educational base. And we saw the development of a whole range of interesting programs, exciting programs that were spearheaded by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, as well as ASPPH and the Association for Teaching, Prevention, and Research. And so we'll see in a minute, we had enormous growth in the programs in that period of starting in 2003, but particularly from 2007 to 2008. Most of these programs were aimed to be originally minors, and it was quite encouraging to see not only the development of minors, but as you'll see, an enormous increase in the number of majors. In the period in 2011 and 2012, there was a move for what became ASPPH to take the lead in developing learning outcomes, which were designed for all undergraduate programs, as well as critical components of an undergraduate major in public health. And that really formed the basis for the current recommendations for majors in as well as curriculum in undergraduate public health. More recently, the undergraduate public health became part of ASPPH's Framing the Future effort and included community colleges in public health. And this report, which came out in late 2014, has become key to undergraduate public health efforts at community colleges. And finally, as many of you may know, the ASPPH has begun a network for public health and global health programs that is designed to really put together and connect the people who work in a variety of different institutions and are now part of undergraduate public health education. You'll see this is a very encouraging graph. It goes up and up and up, and there's no place that it still looks like it's going to stop. And this is the graduation numbers of bachelor's degree programs, students in public health. Interesting, this does not include minors, and you'll see that in the period of 2004, 2007 was really a takeoff stage, and that growth has continued right up to the present. The two biggest components of that growth have been the public health generalist activity, and secondly, the health education and health behavior efforts. And these two efforts really represent a substantial percentage of the current students. We began with the idea that this would be predominantly minors, and it's turned out that it's not only minors, but a large number of majors as well. So hopefully, as you look at what you're going to hear in the next few minutes, you'll have that sense of the enormous growth that has occurred and that is continuing to occur. Now it's my pleasure to turn over the presentation to people who are going to give you a sense of where the student body is now and provide you with some data and some ideas about where things are headed. Our first presenter is Emily Burke, and Emily is manager of data analytics at ASPPH. She oversees annual data collection and reporting for ASPPH members through the ASPPH Data Center. She leads membership engagement efforts around academic public health data and contributes to ad hoc projects, including the research being presented today. She received her MPH from Drexel University School of Public Health and her BA from Johns Hopkins University. Our second presenter will be Dr. Beth Resnick, who serves as the Director of the Office of Public Health Practice and Training and Masters of Science in Public Health and Health Policy program at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Beth received her Doctor of Public Health at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. Her dissertation research focused on the growth of undergraduate public health major and its potential impact on the public health workforce. Emily?
Thank you, Dr. Riegelman. Undergraduate education serves to prepare graduates for entry-level jobs or act as a segue to graduate studies. It is becoming increasingly responsible for creating a well-rounded individual by fostering an environment that promotes academic and personal growth. The SPACES model, created by researchers at the Center for Higher Education Studies at UC Riverside, outlines the multiple purposes of an undergraduate education: social development, personal development, academic development, civic engagement, economic opportunity, meaning career awareness, and settings, meaning classroom climates for learning and campus climates for inclusivity. Graduate education, on the other hand, is meant to create a specialized professional entering their chosen career. As Dr. John Ebel out of Boston College says, undergraduate education gives students a broad general education. Graduate education provides students with more advanced learning in a specialized discipline or subdiscipline. Graduate schools give an in-depth understanding such that a student becomes something of an expert in the topic of study. A good graduate program also teaches advanced skills in such areas as problem solving, mathematics, writing, oral presentation, and technology, each as applied to the particular field of studies. And that is what we'll hope you'll keep in mind as we move through our slides today. Today we'll be discussing higher education, as we just did, and public health education, so as by the numbers, using an environmental scan, going through the learning outcomes, and then finishing up with some graduate outcomes. And as we get started, we'd like to pose this question, which is, who are we training our students to be, and was found in a recent paper published by Sarah McKenzie, who was supposed to speak at the summit back in March. Public health is a unique discipline in that it is building backwards. We started with the MPH as a degree for clinical professionals, moved into the MPH for non-clinical professionals, started creating undergraduate programs, and are now expanding into community colleges and even K through 12. So when we talk about the continuum, we're starting at the beginning is in fact moving from the top down. Recently, in 2016, ASPPH undertook a survey called the Baccalaureate to Master's Degree Relationship Survey. 87 ASPPH members responded, and 64% of them have observed an increase in applicants to master's programs, these who have undergraduate public health degrees. And half of respondents even offer an accelerated bachelor's to master's degree program. So going back to this question of who are we training our students to be, Sarah McKenzie discusses in her paper the distinction between undergraduate public health as education as a liberal arts education approach and public health education as a professional education. We decided to ask this question using the ASPPH annual data and using the practical takeaways from Sarah McKenzie's paper. She notes that there are two guiding frameworks that highlight the critical need to be intentional in selecting a framework, developing desired learning outcomes, and shaping a curriculum based on those decisions. These frameworks, liberal arts versus professional education, shape how we encourage faculty to design and teach courses, how we advise our students about various career paths, and how we talk with external constituencies and with parents or students about the value of the public health major. We took these takeaways and tried to determine which frameworks ASPPH members are using. And we did that by looking at the degrees they're conferring. You can see here in this table that the vast majority are conferring BS and BS-PH degrees versus the BA and BA-PH degrees, which led us to wonder, are those BS, BS-PHs professional degrees, and are those BA, BA-PH degrees liberal arts degrees? But we couldn't just use ASPPH data. So we took another data set from the National Center for Education Statistics and tried to get an even broader view of the undergraduate public health landscape. So what you're looking at here, and I realize this is a busy slide, is on the left-hand side, you're seeing the ASPPH areas of study that are offered and reported by our members. In the next column, you're seeing the SIP codes, which stands for Classification for Instructional Programming Codes. You can see that in the green rows, the numbers between the National Center for Education Statistics institution counts versus the ASPPH institution counts are pretty vast. The difference is vast. And because of that, we decided not to include allied health, biomedical sciences, and nutrition in our environmental scan. You can see here the same table, however, we're showing degree conferrals. where there were 9,560 allied health degree conferrals reported to the National Center for Education Statistics in 2015, there were 1,136 degree conferrals reported to ASPPH. This difference led us to believe that not all allied health degree conferrals were public health as reported to the National Center for Education Statistics, and again, why we did not include those three areas in our study. And with that, I'm going to toss it over to Beth to talk more about our study.
Great, thank you, Emily. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit further about digging into the data that Emily just presented to you. If this is moving forward. So just to give you a sense of what I'm going to be talking about now, so the data that Emily just presented, we wanted to dig a little deeper and find out about these institutions and what kinds of degrees they were offering and a little bit more about where these degrees were housed. So first slide here, and again, so there was about 200 different institutions, again back to those data slides that, those charts that Emily had shown you. It was digging across, going into each of those individual websites from those institutions to find out, okay, what are they counting as a public health degree and where within the school is it housed. So these are in order. So again, there was about 200 institutions. Now some of them might have had more than one degree within their school and maybe in different colleges, but these are in order of where we found the most degrees that were public health. So schools of health professions, health science was the most, and there was about 80 degrees that were housed in those academic homes. And why we're talking about this, I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but as many of you probably are aware in your own institution, the college or school where your degree is has a lot of impact in terms of what the curriculum might be, what the overall vision of that department is, and the focus. So this is why we were looking into that, because we thought it would really help us tease out a little bit more. What are these undergraduate majors and what are they focused on? So schools of health professions, health sciences was the first one. As I said, there was about 80. College of Arts and Sciences, so again, as Dr. Riegelman talked about, sort of that liberal arts approach and Sarah McKenzie's paper. Then the next one was, this one actually took, I think, both Emily and I a little by surprise, but Schools of Education were the third one. And again, as Dr. Riegelman talked about, health education and behavior being a big piece of this undergrad public health. So the schools of public health themselves actually came in fourth in terms of number of undergraduate public health degrees. And this isn't only accredited schools. This was any degree that was put into an entity in the institution that was labeled School of Public Health. So that we didn't confirm that it had to be an accredited school of public health. Then other degrees, there was a few small handful that the programs were actually within the School of Nursing or the medical school. Business, the number was small, but I do think it's important when we think about health administration. I think there was about 9 that were actually in business, which again I think is another important component when we think about undergraduate public health. So that was a pretty clean, clear slide. Now you get to this one and it's like, whoa, this is even more diffused. I can't even give you numbers, and this is just a sample. But so from that slide before where we were talking about what academic home they were housed in, this was actually the department as a part of that school. So again, it might be the School of Education, but it might be the Department of Health Education or the division, or however they use their titles. But so this gives you an idea that it's even more diffused than maybe we had originally thought. And again, this is just a sampling. There was a lot more. So you can get the sense of the broadness and the depth of different topics that are covered here. Continuing to keep digging in, this was the type of majors that were offered. And again, this is just a sample. But I think this can kind of convey the point that it's very wide, very diverse. Some of it could be semantics in terms of what they're calling something. but a lot of it is different content focus areas. And again, for those of us who've been trying to tell people what is public health, we get into it's so big and broad. So I think this gives us a sense of that and is important to consider when we think about the continuum of public health education. So people constantly wanting to know, so what's the curriculum? What are they actually teaching in these programs? So the information I'm going to present now is from a smaller sample that I actually used for my dissertation. This was for programs that were called just public health. So that slide before when I gave you that range of different degrees, this curriculum assessment was just ones that were called public health. Again, they could have been housed in different places, but they were titled as a degree in public health. So you think, oh, this would be clear, right? Well, it wasn't, because even within that subcategory of public health, I found that it was very hard to even compare. Oftentimes I did it, this was a website search, so as I'm sure many of you know, there's a limited information. Sometimes it's available online, sometimes it might be out of date. It was presented in different ways by different institutions. There was 40 institutions that I was looking at for this part of it. But it was very clear, in addition to the websites, I also did interviews with these programs, that the curriculum was evolving. Now, for those of us that work in academia, I think this is an ongoing thing. People are always evolving their curriculum, which we should, right, to adapt to changes. But I think in particular around public health and the fact that it was the newness of this major and all of these different changes. Dr. Riegelman talked about those reports. We also have accreditation, which I'll talk about in a minute, that there really was a big shift going on. A lot of these programs were growing, so some of them were getting new faculty, some of them were shifting from an old model into accreditation to a new model. So the 40 that I spoke to, over 80% had either just done a curriculum revamp or were in the process of doing one. So I think the major itself is really evolving and changing as we speak. There was a few consistencies across, but very few. One was that people seem to like the term epidemiology, because that was the one course that I could find that was labeled similarly, and almost I think every program had a course in epidemiology. The other thing that I found was that there's a 3-course model of like Public Health 101, epidemiology, and global health. It did seem that there was a lot of those being used in these 40 programs, not universally, but there did seem to be a large use of that, which to me suggests 2 things, but when we get to the discussion section, would love to hear if other people have other responses. It suggested to me 2 things. One, that people were really eager for guidance and needing help in terms of setting curriculum, especially if these were newer programs and they were still trying to figure out what they were going to be presenting. And the second thing that it suggested to me was that there is opportunity here for us as a field to sort of help set this agenda and think about curriculum tools, and it's very important both on the national level to develop things, but also at the individual programmatic level in terms of sharing and highlighting best practices. So again, I think the ASPPH network and the summit and all of these kinds of webinars are something that I think, again, would love to hear from you all, would be very useful and effective means of helping to guide this undergraduate public health movement. So I had mentioned accreditation. So clearly this data is from the Council for Education and Public Health, CEF, website, and they are responsible for accrediting both master's and undergraduate public health programs. So as of a few weeks ago, there was 114 public health bachelor's degrees that were approved and 19 applications that were still pending. These programs are both within schools of public health, and also now there's also a standalone accreditation for programs that are not affiliated with a master's of public health or a school of public health. The thing that I got from my interviews with, again, the 40 programs that I think reinforces what I was just saying about the 3-course guidance on that Public Health 101, EPI, and Global Health, was that lot of the respondents were very interested in the accreditation criteria as a way to help them map out help them think about it as a blueprint. What should the competencies be? What are our aims? What domains might we want to look at? So again, they might not follow it exactly, but as a way to have a guideline and again, that eagerness for some guidance on this. In terms of whether they were going to get accredited or not, clearly we can see the numbers are growing. A lot of the newer young programs were still figuring it out. They weren't sure, and they kind of wanted to see what was going to be happening in the field overall. So again, I think that these programs are evolving, and we'll probably see lots of change in the next couple of years. Another thing that to be happening, but again, I don't know for sure the data, it might be too early, and I think Emily and Sarah might talk about this a little bit more, was that the accreditation of the undergrad program seemed to also be contributing to an increase, or at least a potential increase, because people were talking about that they were interested in putting together a combined bachelor's to master's program, especially as SPPH offers an ability to do a joint accreditation. So once you're applying for one, you can get accredited for both at the same time. So again, mine was a small number that I was talking to, but it seemed to me that it was showing that there might be a trend. To talk about more with Emily or Sarah. Oops, trying to move it. Okay, here we go. So back to where we started with Dr. Riegelman about sort of the birth of this movement and the aims. And I think it's important when we talk about this, especially as if we're seeing trends to joint bachelor's to master's degrees, or we're talking about employment, which Emily's going to jump into next, about where they're going and is it going to impact our workforce. And I think, again, it's really important to think about what the difference between an undergrad and a graduate education, as Emily highlighted at the beginning too, is the learning outcomes goal for these undergraduate programs is aimed at what every undergrad as an educated member of society should know and be able to do to promote population health, both locally and globally. So what that means to me is an educated member of society, which could be doing any type of work. It doesn't mean they have to be working in a health agency. It doesn't mean that they have to be considered a public health professional, but more that they would be an educated member of society in whatever they end up doing, whatever their trajectory is. And again, I think there's been a lot of debate about that and how are we differentiating our undergrad from master's programs, and we look forward to hearing from you all in our discussion section. But again, thinking that this is very important when we're thinking about undergrad and its role in the continuum of public health education to understand what the aim of an undergraduate education is versus a master's degree. So with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Emily.
Emily, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you, Beth. Nope, I'm here. Thank you, Beth. And before I get started explaining what you see on this slide, I will say that ASPPH began collecting graduate outcomes data on an annual basis from our members in the most recent 2016 annual data collection cycle. And we collect the data for a number of reasons, including the increasing interest in outcomes-driven education, generally speaking about higher education, the requirement for accredited schools and programs of public health to report graduate outcomes to the accreditor, and also because there's been a lot of interest from our members and from the field about what is happening to our graduates once they graduate. Are they going into employment? What type of employment? Are they going on to further education? So this past year, we collected this information, and what you're looking at here is the graduate outcome of undergraduates as reported by our member schools and programs of public health. I did not include the undergraduates for which there was no known outcome. So what you can see here is that out of almost 1,400 undergraduate graduates, 65% are employed and 26% are enrolled in further study. And you can probably guess The number that are enrolled in further study is much higher for undergraduates than it is for graduates. At the graduate level, it's about 14%, and the employment level for graduates is at about 77%. Now, of those employed undergraduate graduates, we have employment sectors for 877, and 34% are working with a for-profit organization. Almost 20% are working at a healthcare organization, and 11% are working at a government agency. This is pretty different from the graduate level outcomes. The number one employment sector for our graduate level graduates was healthcare organization at 25%. The second was government agency at 18%. And then the academic institution was 17.6%. So whereas for-profit organization is the number one employment sector for our undergrads, it was the fourth highest at 15.4% for our graduates. So this information would lead you to believe that once they complete their degrees, undergrads and graduates are not securing the same employment opportunities. And with that, we will move into, if I can get the slide to go ahead for you, into the discussion and questions.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you to Emily, Beth, and Dick. We are going to take this time to address questions from the question box, and we remind all who are participating in today's webinar that while you are muted, you are able to type your questions into the question box, and we will address them as we receive them. All right, so it looks like the first one, are you all finding, or do you have any information on whether public health is still very much of a discovery major versus are students more inclined to declare as a freshman?
So this is Beth, Sarah, and I'll take a first jump at that, and then Emily, maybe you can talk a little bit about what your data shows. So in the 40 program directors that I interviewed, there was a clear sense that in the past, public health had definitely been a discovery major. And when we define it as a discovery major, what that means is students came to the undergrad campus not even knowing what public health was. And then they entered through, it seemed to be a couple different pathways. One was they might have taken a general education public health course, got excited about it, didn't know there was such a thing, and decided to come. Some maybe came from other programs, say pre-med or nursing, that just weren't a good fit with them, and they ended up deciding that they prefer to do public health. And then others, just ended up finding out about it and deciding to come into public health. But there did seem to be a trend indicating that there seemed to be an uptick most recently of some students coming to campus and actually knowing what public health was before they even got there. Now, sometimes, depending on the school, you can't declare your major until your end of your sophomore year, but the idea being that people were actually coming to the university with public health as an interest area versus just kind of stumbling upon it. I think an implication, and again, I defer to the people on the call with their own institutions, a big implication of this is whether you're actually attracting students to your university as new students, so financially for your institution, if someone was coming because they wanted a public health degree, versus that they just happened to stumble upon it after they got there, the major is not seen then as drawing in new students, which, in our this day and age, that's important distinction from the institutional perspective in a lot of cases. So Emily, I don't know if you're seeing anything in your data about that, or have any more detailed data from your membership?
Sure. So what we're finding from our members is that it's very difficult for them to report admissions data on their undergraduates. And they've given us a couple different reasons for this, one of them being that it is a discovery major and the students don't go through the undergraduate admissions process. They come in as a second or third year student. But another reason is that they just don't have the school itself doesn't accept the application for undergrads. It's the university. So while it appears in our data that it is still very much a discovery major, I think we'd have to look more to the universities themselves to determine whether or not the students are applying directly to the public health major or somewhere else in the university.
And this is Beth again, one more point to add that I did hear consistently across my programs that I interviewed was that they were all getting lots and lots of students, oftentimes more than they could handle, and that seemed to be fairly consistent across.
Great, thank you both. The next question has to do with community colleges, and since this webinar is about the continuum, this person is asking, what do you all see as the involvement of community colleges in public health education going forward? Dick, this might be a great question for you to address.
Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about the Community College and Public Health report. It was an effort to really extend the continuum of public health education to the community colleges. And it was part of the Framing the Future ASPPH effort in 2013, 14, and 15. And it produced a report that was contributed to by Sophie and other health profession, other public health educational organizations, as well as the practice organizations. And the results were of two kinds. One is it developed frameworks for transfer degrees. And those transfer degrees were designed to be curriculum at the community college level that then could be transferred to bachelor's degrees at the four-year college level. And these included the Educated Citizen in Public Health Generalist Framework. It also included health education, health administration and policy, and environmental health. And those were explicitly associate degree transfer degrees. Also within the report were recommendations for what the community colleges call applied associate degrees, one that do not necessarily transfer to bachelor's degrees. And the one that was recommended for both associate degrees and certificate programs were the health navigation, or some people will refer to as community health worker degrees. And these are these were recommended as programs that were to be self-contained, but also to become part of nursing and other health professions programs at the community college level. And what's happened most recently is there's been an expansion of interest in allied health and in nursing, in public health education. And the League for Innovation in the Community College, which is the partner in this effort and represents over 800 of the 1,100 community colleges, they are working to develop programs that are transfer programs. But they're also now integrating 3 core courses that were recommended in the report. Personal health with a population perspective, an overview of public health, and health communications. And they're trying to integrate these into general education and nursing education, as well as allied health education. So there's a large degree of interest in the community colleges. We hope that that will translate into transfer students and students interested in your programs at the bachelor's degree level. So keep your eyes open in terms of what you'll see happening in the coming years in terms of the community college movement.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Riegelman. We will certainly keep our eye on them. I know a lot of activity is happening in that sphere. And I know that actually some of the bachelor's programs are starting to have more and more connections with the community colleges as well. This next question asks about the types of positions that bachelor's degree holders are able to acquire in public health after graduation. I know we talked about where, but do you have any additional information about exactly what they're doing?
Sure. This is Emily from ASPPH. We do have some information on not just the employment sector, but the employment details. So in other words, we asked if a graduate is working in government, are they working in federal government, state government, local, tribal, and so on and so forth. I don't know the information off the top of my head, but we always encourage our folks to email us at data@asppph.org so that we can provide more information.
Also, Sarah, this is Beth. I just want to add a little bit because I asked my interviewees about this. So again, it was a small sample of 40 programs, but they talked a lot about, especially the ones that had internship requirements, that a lot of times students were staying on in positions with their internship site. And oftentimes, it was a lot of times people mentioned local health departments, but other places that were mentioned were also hospitals, other types of healthcare provider organizations, as well as sometimes nonprofits as well.
Wonderful, thank you. This next question asked about the response rate for the undergraduate outcome data presented earlier in the presentation. So the response rate, Emily?
Sure. So we received responses from just about half of our members. 54 ASPPH members reported data, and we have 107. And in terms of the undergraduate response rate, I would say that it was not quite at 50%, but at about between 10 and 20%. And I'll expand on that.
Yes, please.
We had about 2,000 responses for undergrads and about 7,000 undergraduate degree conferrals. Now, not all 2,000 provided outcomes data.
Great, thank you. This question asks about the accreditation process. I believe that they're specifically addressing CEPH accreditation. Beth, in your interviews with these programs, did you talk about or ask about their intentions to become CEPH accredited? And if so, kind of the positives or negatives that your interviewees expressed regarding that route?
Yes, so I did speak with them about it. They were all aware, universally they were all aware of it, very interested. There was sort of a mix of interest and pros and cons. So as I noted before, I think people felt that the idea of accreditation in the sense of having more information on program goals, outcomes, domain areas was helpful in terms of a blueprint, particularly those programs that were newer and trying to sort of get a sense of mapping out their program. The pros for accreditation was obviously it gives it credibility, it sort of gives it standing. Some institutions overall, there was a push within their institution to be accredited, especially at state institutions. Sometimes there was rules, I don't know if rules, but sort of guidelines by the state in terms of if there wasn't an accreditation process, they wanted their programs to be accredited. The negative about it, especially for smaller schools, was the expense, the amount of work that goes into being accredited, as well as some of the faculty ratios that are required in terms of did they have the resources and the staff to be able to become accredited. The other thing, well, on the flip side, some places felt, well, if they were accredited, then it gave them a reason to be able to get more resources and staff from their institution. So again, depending on the political landscape in people's individual institutions, that kind of depended. But another negative, which is a more conceptual programmatic reason, would be, and I found this more in the programs from liberal arts, colleges of liberal arts, was that they really valued their multidisciplinary approach and were a little hesitant, and again, they were digging into it, so they didn't have an opinion yet, but they were a little hesitant in the sense of, was it going to keep them from implementing in a more creative way? Some of that was based on content area, really wanting a cross-cutting, and some of that could be, honestly, again, a resource question if they didn't have the faculty to teach the core public health course. So their students were taking courses in other departments, and they didn't necessarily have the oversight over those courses. So it definitely seemed like there was a lot of mixed feelings. And again, I think most of, especially the smaller institutions, were really trying to see how this was going to play out over the next few years in terms of whether they felt like they had to be accredited or if it was okay if they weren't.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight. And I'd like to encourage anyone who is even thinking about going down that road to go ahead and pick up the phone or use an email and contact staff at CEPH. They're super helpful and can certainly answer any questions that you have. So definitely want to encourage people to do that. This question asks, how can minors in public health fit in with undergraduate education, and are they beneficial? So does anyone have an opinion about this, or Dr. Riegelman, do you have thoughts?
This is Dick. I can give you some thoughts on it. Minors were really one of the first things that we anticipated happening, and they did grow quite a bit. And we saw them as a transition vehicle into majors. But what's interesting is that the minors have continued to exist even in institutions that have majors. And I think that's because they serve somewhat different purposes. We found a large interest in students who are majoring, who are in arts and sciences, who want to explore careers, who want to get preparation for the MCAT exam, who want to have a broader background in preparation for health careers, so quite a few students are now doing minors, and then also having a major in a whole range of activities, from international affairs to psychology, and even into areas like business and political science. So I think it's increasingly complements a major and isn't necessarily a competitive with it.
So this is Beth. I also wanted to add a little bit on that because I also spoke about minors in my interviews as well, and agree with what Dr. Riegelman said. It seemed to fit well. There's just 2 points I wanted to make. One is it seems that there's an overall trend in undergraduate education, aside from public health, just across, in either having double majors or minors. Again, I think students feel that they're going to come out with more when they've had these 2 degrees or a minor. And public health fits very well, both conceptually and also sometimes programmatically. So I know I had one interviewee that kind of gave me a list of what her students had either double majored or minored in, and it was a huge, long list of anything from foreign languages to, the areas that Dr. Riegelman just mentioned, to pre-med, the MCAT change that now includes social sciences and public health as part of it. So it's definitely a nice fit. The other thing that one of my interviewees mentioned, which I think is important, is that if you have a minor, it's a nice way to have more students who are engaged in public health. You're getting more revenue from those students in your courses, but you don't have to take on the full responsibility of them in terms of advising and having them, ownership over those students in that academic sense.
I think that's an important point that Beth makes, because it creates a larger student body, and one of the things that's nice in a program is to have enough interaction between the students.
Yeah. So it was another way that people felt you could bring people in without having the burden of having to advise them. If they're not your majors, they didn't have to have an internship. So it was a less onerous way to still have more students coming into the program. There was it kind of went both ways. Some programs actually started with the minor, as Dr. Riegelman mentioned initially, as a way to sort of start to get the program off the ground. You could then show if students were coming and then sort of build out from that minor. And then other programs seem to be reversed, like they started with the major and then realized we have all these students and we can't accommodate them. Let's start a minor, and we can then, again, back to my point of bringing more students in to the field without having to have the onerous ownership of advising them. So it did seem like it was a really nice fit for the major. And again, in terms of credits and structure of the minor, it was all over the place and very much evolving. There was minors that maybe were just 9 credits. There was also minors that were 32 credits. It really was a large range. So again, I think people are still trying to figure that out. And from a field perspective, I think that's something that we could also offer guidance and maybe some direction in terms of structuring a public health minor as well as a major.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I think this next question actually kind of refers back to Emily mentioned a paper at the very beginning of this presentation that was written by Sarah McKenzie and Mark Kiviniemi that was supposed to be presented, a formal presentation at the summit. And the title of the paper is Framing Undergraduate Public Health Education as Liberal Education. Who are we training our students to be, and how do we do that? It was published in Frontiers in Public Health earlier this year, and when I will be sure to post a link to that on the event page and email that out to all registrants when this recording is posted. But this question asks about potential income after graduation. I feel like this is an issue faced by all those who are pursuing undergraduate degrees and looking to enter the workforce after graduation. But this person specifically asked, how do organizations need to reconsider how they structure their jobs in order to meet the demand of all these incoming new graduates, I guess, with a public health degree? Any thoughts on that?
Well, Sarah, this is Beth. I'm not sure I understood the question. Is that in terms of where they would have been hiring an MPH and now they're hiring a bachelor's, or is this just more a generic question about undergrad employees overall?
I think it's more public health undergraduate degree holders, but if you have a thought on how it looks in relation to those with graduate degrees versus those with undergraduate degrees, I'm certainly sure it's welcome.
Well, again, I think going back to the core learning outcomes that we think about, I think as faculty in schools in undergraduate programs, and it's not limited to public health, that's obviously a big concern for people when they get out. They need to know what am I qualified to do. So again, thinking about it in a broad sense, I know oftentimes we have this discussion about professional degree versus liberal arts degree, but in my opinion, as educators, we need to offer to any of our students, whatever their degrees are, that we're training them in things that when they get out, that they're qualified to do to fill positions. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's at a health agency, but at any agency. And important in terms of when we develop our curriculum, and this is some of what my dissertation focused in on, that we are engaging with employers and thinking about, and I know that the learning outcomes did include stakeholder input, and that's really important to make sure that students are graduating with the skills that are needed for the employers.
I think one of the things that's changed in the last couple of years that will be important down the line is that the certifying public health, the certifying examination, is now open to bachelor's degree graduates with 5 years experience. And so I think that does increase the value and relevance of the bachelor's degree as part of the public health workforce.
And if I could just add on to that, what the data is showing us about their employment is that while the graduate level graduates are going into what is most likely public health and health related employment, we can't be so certain that those 34% of for-profit workers at the undergraduate level are in fact working in health or public health related fields, and they may just be coming to non-health related employers as educated citizens, which I think is great for those employers. So.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are coming up on 2 o'clock Eastern, and to be respectful of everyone's time, I want to say thank you to all, thank you to our moderator and speakers today, Richard Riegelman, Emily Burke, and Beth Resnick. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be archived on the event page in the near future. All registrants will receive an email once that is posted with a link, and we will also post a copy of the slides, which are available as a handout for this webinar as well. And to let everyone know, we do have a few other upcoming webinars in the ASPPH Presents series. Both of these upcoming webinars, Approaching the SPP CEPH Application Process and Navigating Program Assessment, and Reaching Beyond Our Students, Recruit, Educate, and Engage, were originally scheduled to be presented at the 2017 Undergraduate Summit in March. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.